apples?
Yeah, these are apples. And this is a semi-dwarf called Bud 118. So again, there's all these different names and numbers, and the main differences are the size that they're going to grow to. So I just have these stored in a bucket with some soil, and as I need them, I just take them out and use them for grafting. And these were sent to me this spring. Again, they're sent dormant, so you get it bare root, and then you put it in something immediately so that you can keep it from drying out. And then once you're ready to graft, so the other piece of the equation is the scion wood, it's called. These are the cuttings from the cultivar that we want to propagate. And these are harvested in the winter time when the trees are dormant. So basically like when you prune fruit trees generally. And the other tidbit of, I guess, critical information with the scion wood is it's always first year wood. So we're never harvesting second or third year wood. So generally, depending on the vigor of the variety, they're about pencil diameter-ish. And then, sometimes you get bigger first year wood on the more vigorous varieties. So I have a few different kinds here. And we're gonna start with the one called Harrison. This is a cider apple. Also can be eaten fresh. And what I'm looking for is similar diameter. Ideally, you get like the same diameter scion wood as your rootstock, but they don't have to be at all. Rootstock can be anywhere from this diameter all the way up to a trunk that's 8-10 inches in diameter. Wow. Scion wood is always this size, but you can graft this scion wood onto a mature tree, a medium-sized tree, or onto a baby like this. So there's a lot of different strategies and approaches for grafting.
Would it grow faster if it was on a older, bigger rootstock?
Oh yeah, yep. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So the technique that I'm going to show you is called a whip and tongue graft. And I guess a little bit on the tools. Grafting knife. It could be any old knife, although the problem with using something like just a regular Swiss Army knife or something like that is they have a double bevel generally, so it's sharpened on both sides. This is flat on one side and just a single bevel. And the reason that they're designed like that is something about the single bevel. It gives you a nice straight slanted cut. You don't want, when you try and pull a double beveled knife into wood, it wants to curve and create like a little C-shaped cut. This gives you a nice straight slant. And the beveled side is always facing up. So this is a right-handed knife. This knife is designed to be pulled towards you. So I'm not going like that. I'm gonna actually be pulling it towards me, which for a lot of people that's like seems sketchy, but it's actually a really safe way to use a knife. And I'll kind of show you as I do this. So I look for kind of a nice smooth part of the bark. There's this little gash here, so I'm gonna cut right below that, right in this zone. And I'm gonna just make like a slanted cut. And this knife probably needs to be sharpened a little bit. So like that, just like just a straight slant. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna create like a matching cut on the scion wood. Yeah, this knife's a little dull, and that's why it keeps holding on to wood as I make the cut. And then what we do, this would just be called a whip graft or a splice graft if I were to tape this up and leave this like this. Now, this is not really a very good graft because if you're alone in the nursery, it's hard to wrap this up because as soon as I let go, it's gonna fall. So somebody at some point in time figured out a really good technique, and this is where the whip and tongue comes in. So what you do is, this is the heartwood right here in the middle, which is essentially like dead wood basically. And then this is the sapwood, and then this is the cambium, this thin edge. What we're going to do is we're going to go just above the heartwood, and I'm going to actually push the knife in very gently. It's almost like I'm actually not really pushing the knife as much as I'm pushing the wood into the knife. And I'm going to just create a little tongue, a little groove. And I like to use my knife as sort of a gauge. I'll usually go about 1/3 to halfway through the, the width of the knife. And now we're going to do the same thing on the scion wood.
So you want to try to go parallel with the trunk?
That's sort of what you want to aim for, yeah. Another tidbit, you don't need a big stick. Usually we keep 1 to 3 buds. I'm going to shorten that. And now, I can wrap it up really well. And so the main thing is that the cambium, that little green edge on the scion wood and on the rootstock, lines up on at least one side. So you can see on this side we have a really nice union. The scion wood was a little bit skinnier, so it doesn't line up perfectly there, but the fact that it's good on one side, that's all we really need. So right here is the side where it's lining up real nice.
Okay. Now, somebody came into our class and showed us how to do that with grapevine.
Okay.
And he showed us a giant non-movable machine. You can move it, but it was because he mentioned how dangerous doing it by hand is and how many people were getting hurt and stuff. But he did a puzzle piece. He made a puzzle piece shape.
Yeah, I'll show you. Actually, I've got a tool here that I can show. And then the next thing is just wrapping it up. This is parafilm grafting tape. It's non-adhesive, but it's self-fusing, so it sticks to itself, but it doesn't have any glue on it. And it's also really stretchy, although when it gets cold, it doesn't like to. And so there's kind of a technique. Sort of just hold the graft and just spin it. See it. This stuff doesn't like the cold.
So it's kind of like a Band-Aid, so it can heal.
Exactly. So this is the Band-Aid or the cast that's holding it together, holding it physically together, and then the last step is I put on a grafting sealant. This is a product called Doc Farwell's. This is almost like a, it's basically like Elmer's glue, I think. Traditionally people would use wax, like beeswax, melt it. And the point of this, I've sacrificed an old butter knife as a grafting knife. The point of this is so that the wrap holds it together, and then this seals it so that the scion wood in the rootstock doesn't dry out, and also so that it doesn't let moisture in. So it's just kind of a final seal. You don't really have to put it on top of the tape, but I like to just as an extra measure. And really that's all there is to it. And now we would either plant this in a nursery bed and grow it out for a few seasons in a nursery bed, or we'd plant it in a pot, grow it out for a few seasons in a pot, and then put it in its final location. You could stick this in its final home, but I wouldn't recommend it because there's a chance that the graft won't take. So it's better to kind of nurse it for at least a season. So the tree the Seatown Red that we planted out there, I did this last spring, potted it up, grew it in a pot for that season, and then we planted it. So that's sort of the flow. So here I'm guessing you'll probably just stick it in the nursery or something, or in a pot or whatever.
I'm keeping that.
Yeah, I mean,
Sweet.
I'm not taking it with me.
Yeah, no, I'll stick it in the nursery in a pot and we got a sprinkler in there. And is it better to have it out in a sunny spot, or I would imagine kind of a semi-shade? Or
Yeah,
shaded?
semi-shade, sort of for the first year. Just an area where you can really kind of baby it. So your nursery area is perfect, probably.
Cool.
And then the last thing, is putting your label on. This is Harrison, so I'll just put the variety, and then we'll put the date, and we'll also put the rootstock. So, Bud 118. And what's today? The 14th?
514.
So the rootstock, was that just made from a branch?
Good
Or-
question. So the rootstock, just how the varieties are propagated clonally, any named rootstock, Bud 118, Bud 9, whatever, M7, those are also cloned. And the way they clone these rootstocks is how we were talking about the stool mounding over there. So if you wanted to propagate a bunch of Bud 118, you'd buy one to start, you'd plant it in the ground, grow it for a year or two, cut it down, let it sucker, resprout, and then you'd pile sawdust around those sprouts. Stool mounding is what that's called. And then you generate all these clonal rootstock. So that's how,
okay.
or Antonofka, that rootstock that Levi has that he was talking about planting around the site, that's a seedling rootstock. So Antonofka is grown from seed. So it's like a strain that's grown from seed for grafting onto, or you can grow it out as a tree and it produces pretty good fruit itself. So another way to generate rootstock would be find an apple that's wild, that's local, that's doing really well, collect its seeds, plant a few hundred of them, and now you're growing your own rootstock. Generally, when you plant seedlings as rootstock, you can kind of expect that they're going to be close to standard in size. Where, when you're buying clonal rootstock, you can get, like, I want a dwarf or a semi-dwarf or whatever.
Is that semi-standard, you said?
This is semi-dwarf.
Semi-dwarf, which is
Yeah.
about what size mature?
Semi-dwarf, I think they say that's like 40% or 50%, something like that.
So like 12 feet or 15
yeah, like
feet?
15 feet. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, how big of a thing is grafting? Like, I know that there aren't that many people who can successfully graft.
I mean,
How-
there's a lot of, like, in the orchard world, it's really common. The people who graft grapevines, they're usually trying to grow vinifera, European wine grapes, and they're just, like, not that hardy, so they graft them onto hardier rootstock. In my opinion, that's kind of silly. I don't know. They don't really want to grow here, so I wouldn't try to grow. I mean,
Right.
you could try to grow vinifera grapes, but there's other things that grow here better.
Right.
So, like, grafting apples is really easy. Apple, I think, is the easiest. Apple, pear. Once you get into things like walnut and oak and some of the nut trees, they're really difficult.
So it's not so much the person, but the thing they're trying to graft.
Yeah, the species, and I mean the person too, but mainly, yeah, the difficulty depends on the species. Apple's a really good beginner one. I've had apple grafts where I, like, did it all rough and it's all bumpy, and I was like, there's no way this is gonna take, and then they just grow. So it's like, it's pretty forgiving, especially with apple. But I will tell a little brief story about we had a client, and we did some grafting for him, and he really wanted to try it, so he started doing it. And he gets the knife, he starts going, he's like, oh, I'm an old-time whittler, guys. And we were like, no, you don't want, like, this isn't whittling. You want, like, one cut, like a smooth cut, you're not, like, working away at it. You want a smooth surface. So it's definitely not whittling. This is a tool that makes it a little bit easier. Don't put your finger in there. This, we'll do another one. We'll do honey gold.
Ooh.
So when I'm, like, choosing a rootstock out of the bundle, generally you buy these based on caliper size. So I think these were 1/4 inch or something like that, or and I'll, like, kind of size them up as I'm choosing one based on the the scion wood I have. So, yeah, there's a few of these tools. There's one called the Omega tool, which is the most common one. I don't really like the Omega tool. They make a really short union, like, in length, so it can break off pretty easily. My friend Grant Schultz, he imported these, and I forget where he got these from. I think it's just called a V-grafter, but he sells them on his website, newfarmsupply.com. I think they're like 100 or 200 bucks, somewhere in that range. Really nice tool. I just got this year, and I've been liking it. So you basically just set this on here. There's like a little guide, like that's where your rootstock goes. And then on the scion, we're just creating the opposite cut.
Make sure you know which way is up on your scion wood.
Buds up.
Yeah.
I worked at this nursery, Oiko's Tree Crop, some of you might know, and there's like a running joke there. People would call and like ask how to plant, and we would always just say roots up. You'd think people would know, right? And so it's literally just.
Wonder how many people actually try planting like that.
So that's, pretty good, pretty quick and easy. There's definitely less room for getting hurt. It's a safer tool for sure, but I think there's something fun about doing the.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing like hundreds of trees a day, you definitely want one of those, and you can mount it onto a workbench or something. I had a friend who connected one to like a foot pedal, so she could really pump them out.
Now, when you're grafting, you have to graft apple scion wood to apple rootstock.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the one thing I always forget to talk about. Yeah, general rule of thumb is apple to apple, pear to pear, peach to peach. There's some examples of what's called intergeneric cross-compatibility, where, for instance, hawthorn you can graft pear onto, or quince you can graft pear onto. There's some stone fruits that are compatible with each other, but generally it's species to species, and whenever there's that cross-compatibility, it's always plants within the same family. So there's never an example of plants in two different families that are compatible with one another. And grafting is something that actually happens like in nature. Like trees will graft together, limbs will graft together if they're rubbing against one another. And then roots also graft together too, and there's some really cool studies they've done on that in forests, showing how roots from trees that are close to one another will graft together and share resources and transport resources.
And you can graft onto a tree branch, right?
Yeah, and we could actually we could do a quick demo of that on the tree over there if people want to see. It would give you a much more comprehensive understanding of grafting, because really this is like, I'm showing you one little piece of the puzzle here. The main takeaway from this, the main principle, if there's one thing that makes grafting work, it's cambium to cambium. So you always have to have cambium contact on the rootstock and the scion wood. Otherwise, it's just not gonna. There's no. They can't.
And cambium is the green.
It's the green. It's the growing tissue of the tree. So when you look at
like the outer.
It's the outer
really
ring.
Thin outer layers.
Exactly. And when you look at when you cut a tree down and look at the age of the tree, each one of those rings is like the cambium from that year. So it's where active cell division is happening. It's where the tree's growing.
Well, I'm gonna have to get going here soon too.
Yeah.
So, but it was awesome coming out and seeing all
Thanks
this.
for coming.
So.
Yeah, thanks, Rose.
Yeah.
Thank
Nice
you.
to have you.
Take care.
Now, storing scion wood, what do you usually, order? Is it usually taken in February or something?
Yeah. So, and then there's companies that sell it. Like some nurseries sell scion wood, and you can buy it by the foot. And you do that in the winter time. That's typically when you buy it if you're getting it from a nursery. And then you want to store it in cool, moist conditions. So usually what I'll do is have a moist paper towel or newspaper or something like that, just to keep it from drying out. So this is yellow transparent.